A few weeks ago, my husband started telling me I work too hard and need to rest, so he bought me vacation tickets. I was thrilled. But when I returned, I noticed my daughter and son talking about some Victoria. They said they want to see her again, want to try her food again. I decided to ask my husband about this Victoria they were mentioning. He said she's just a nanny and I have nothing to worry about. But a few days later, I found a fake phone hidden in the nightstand, where I discovered text messages and a long call history where he was saying he had never fallen in love with a girl like this before. I simply called him and said he's the most stupid, unfaithful husband. He replied that he doesn't care. But when he returned home a month later, he saw an empty house. No kids, no belongings, no wife, and all the money was gone too. This horrified him, so the next day he was on the doorstep of her mom and dad's house. I honestly don't know if anyone here actually reads the really long posts, but I have to get this out before I completely lose my mind. I've been lurking on Reddit forever and have never actually posted anything, but I feel like if I don't write this all down somewhere, I'm going to start screaming at random people in the Walmart parking lot. I'm not even kidding about that. I'm just going to say everything ugly and messy, exactly as it happened, because I desperately need to know if I'm going insane or if this situation is as completely messed up as it feels to me right now. First, let me give you some background about myself. My name is Rebecca, I'm 26 years old, and I have 2 kids. My daughter is 6 and my son is 4. I'm married to David, who's 28, and up until recently, our relationship has been what I'd call functional, if not exactly romantic. We're definitely not couple goals or anything like that, but things were stable enough. We had our routines. We'd fight about stupid stuff like laundry mountains and doom scrolling at dinner, and he'd forget to buy milk even when I literally texted him a reminder with 3 exclamation points. His family is from here, so they're constantly in our business, which can be exhausting. My family lives about 5 minutes away, and while they're nosy too, it's more in that bring you soup when you're sick kind of way that actually helps. We're not rich and we're not poor. We do okay financially. I'm not trying to flex or anything, just giving you context for what comes next. So last month, David starts acting weirdly nice. And I don't mean flowers and let's plan a date night nice. I mean strategically nice, in a way that felt calculated. Suddenly, he's getting up before me every morning to make the kids breakfast, telling me to stay in bed because I deserve a break, and handling the school drop-off without being asked. At first, I was thinking, okay, I'm definitely not complaining about this development. This is the same guy who once told me with a straight face that he didn't know how the toaster worked. I started wondering if maybe he'd watched some TikTok about being a better husband or something. I really didn't want to jinx it by questioning the sudden change too much. When I mentioned it to my sister Lisa, who's always suspicious of everything and everyone, she just laughed and said, "Maybe he finally realized you were about to snap if you had to clean one more lunchbox." I laughed too, and I really wanted to believe that was all it was. But then it became even more pronounced. He started saying things like, "Don't worry about cleaning the house, I'll take care of it later. And I'll handle the grocery shopping this week, you just relax." I mean, logically, I should have been absolutely thrilled, right? But something about it felt off because he's never been that guy. He's always been more of the, "I'll do it, but I'm going to be grumpy about it the entire time" type of person. Plus, he was suddenly super chill about everything. He was letting the kids have way more screen time than usual, not making a fuss about bedtime routines, and not grilling me about what I spent at Walmart, which honestly was suspicious in itself because he usually goes through every receipt like he's doing a forensic audit. So I started noticing these little things that individually seemed harmless, but together painted a concerning picture. Like, he always had his phone on him before, but now he kept it on silent all the time. I'd catch him laughing at something on his screen, and when I'd ask what was funny, he couldn't really explain it, or would just brush it off with something vague like just a meme or work stuff. One day, I heard him singing in the car with the windows rolled up. And when I really listened, I realized he was playing some song from 2014 that he's never even liked. It wasn't even on any of his usual playlists. His entire mood seemed better, way better, than it should have been for someone who usually hates his commute and acts like he's allergic to basic household chores. When I brought this up to Lisa again, she said half-jokingly, "Maybe he's cheating." I rolled my eyes and replied, "With who? He's either at home, at the gym, or driving kids around. He's just not the type." Or at least I didn't think he was the type. But her comment got me thinking, if he wasn't actually seeing someone in person, was he at least talking to someone online? I really didn't want to be that person, you know? The paranoid wife who questions every little change. but it genuinely felt like he was living in a completely different emotional universe than the rest of us. Then the kids started saying weird stuff that made my stomach drop. My daughter came home from school one day and casually mentioned, "Miss Victoria let us have apple juice during snack time today." I asked her, "Who's Miss Victoria?" She explained that Miss Victoria was at school sometimes and that she knew Daddy's favorite songs. Then my son chimed in with, "Miss Victoria has purple hair and tattoos, but Daddy says that's cool." That night, I asked David directly, "Who's Victoria?" He barely looked up from his phone and said she was just a teacher's assistant, then added, "Don't overthink everything, Rebecca." I let it go in the moment, but it was really bugging me. The next day, I texted one of the other moms from school and asked if she knew anything about a Victoria working there. She said she had no idea but offered to ask her kid about it. The following day, she got back to me. None of the other kids had mentioned anyone named Victoria, just mine. That's when I really started watching more closely. David was suddenly out of the house more often, always claiming he was running errands or that he was busy with something. He seemed to have developed this whole new personality. He was using music I'd never heard him listen to, incorporating phrases I'd never heard him use. Like he'd absorbed someone else's vocabulary overnight. We've been together for 10 years, and I know this man inside and out, so these changes were impossible to ignore. Whenever I asked him to help with something around the house, he was all smiles and, "I've got it, don't worry about it." When I'd ask if he was feeling okay, he'd respond with, "Never better," in this almost aggressively cheerful way. I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind, questioning my own perception of reality. Fast forward to last Friday, and everything came crashing down in the most devastating way possible. I was running late for basketball snacks. You know how it is with kids' sports? There's always something you're supposed to bring and somehow forgot about until the last minute. I grabbed David's keys and ran out to the car. It's not just his car, by the way. We only have one car, so we share it constantly. I was looking around for his water bottle because I thought I could grab it while I was there, and the glove compartment was a complete mess. As I reached in to try to organize it a bit, my hand hit something weird. It was a phone, but not his regular phone. It was a completely different device that I'd never seen before. At first, I thought maybe it was just an old phone he'd forgotten about. But when I turned it on, it wasn't locked, and it was definitely being used regularly. My hand started shaking as I realized what I was looking at. This phone had about 3 months' worth of messages, and the most recent conversations were all from someone called Victoria, with a heart emoji next to her name. I saw a photo that made my blood run cold. It was her, with the purple hair and tattoos just like my kids had described, smiling with my children at the playground. I kept scrolling, and there were more photos. Her and David sitting in our car together, him smiling while her hand rested on his arm, looking completely comfortable and intimate. The text messages were even worse. There were conversations about "can't wait for our weekend together" and finally starting over with the right person. I found messages about "once we tell Rebecca, this will all be real," and other planning discussions that made it clear this wasn't just some casual thing. They were making actual plans for a future together. I literally felt like I was going to throw up right there in the driveway. I couldn't process what I was seeing, but I had enough presence of mind to take photos of the messages with my own phone. I wasn't even thinking clearly. I was just operating on pure autopilot. But the worst part was when I scrolled back further and found messages where David was talking about me to her. He said things like, "She's so tired all the time. She won't notice anything." And I feel trapped, but you make me feel alive again. Reading those words felt like being punched in the stomach. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something, but I couldn't, because the kids were inside the house waiting for me. So I just sat in the car for what felt like forever, staring at this phone and trying to make sense of how my entire life had just imploded in the span of 5 minutes. I felt completely numb and furious at the same time. I somehow managed to pull myself together enough to go back inside and pretend like nothing had happened. The kids were still playing, completely oblivious to the fact that their world had just been turned upside down. When David walked in about an hour later with his usual cheerful demeanor, asking if the kids were ready for whatever activity we had planned, I just nodded. My hands were still shaking, but I managed to keep it together on the surface. I wanted to slap him. I wanted to scream in his face and demand to know how he could do this to us, to me, to our children. But I didn't. Instead, I waited until he was in the shower, and then I sat on the toilet lid and decided to send him a text message to his real phone, not the secret one I'd just discovered. I typed, "Found the phone, found the photos, found the messages. Congratulations, you're officially the world's dumbest cheater. He didn't reply at first, which somehow made it even more infuriating. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he texted back, "You always ruin things. I was going to tell you when it was the right time." I nearly dropped my phone when I read that response. The audacity of it was breathtaking. I went into the kitchen, and he came out of the bathroom with just a towel around his waist, acting completely casual like nothing had happened. He actually had the nerve to ask if I wanted him to make tea. I said, "Are you serious right now?" He replied, "Don't make this into a scene." "You made it a scene," I shot back. Then he had the absolute gall to say, "You never listen to me. You're always tired." I said, "I'm tired because I do everything around here while you're apparently living a double life. You never let me be myself," he continued, as if this was somehow my fault. "What, yourself is a liar?" I asked. "You're being dramatic," he said dismissively. That's when I completely lost it. I threw his secret phone at the counter. It bounced and landed on the floor with a satisfying crack. He picked it up like it was nothing, like this was just a minor inconvenience in his day. Then he had the audacity to walk past me and deliberately bump my shoulder as he headed toward the door. I shoved him back, hard. He grabbed his keys and left without another word, slamming the door so forcefully that I was sure the neighbors heard it. Thank God the kids were in the living room watching Bluey and didn't witness any of that confrontation. I immediately texted my sister Lisa. She told me to come over with the kids, that our mom was there, and they'd help me figure everything out. But I wasn't ready for that yet. I told her, "Not yet, I need to think. I need to breathe." For the next 2 hours, David didn't come back. He didn't text, he didn't call, nothing. I just started pacing back and forth in the kitchen, counting spoons in the drawer like if I could just do something normal and mundane, maybe this nightmare wouldn't be real. Then I got a message from an unknown number that just said, "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I blocked the number immediately. I called my mom and simply said, "Can you come over?" She asked, "Of course, sweetie. Do I need to bring anything?" "Just yourself," I replied. My mom showed up about 20 minutes later. Bringing cookies like that was somehow going to fix this absolute disaster of a situation. She sat down at the kitchen table and simply said, "What happened?" I told her everything. About finding the phone, the messages, the photos, David's reaction, all of it. She didn't immediately jump to giving me advice like, "Leave him," or "Try to work it out." She just listened and then said, "I'm here for whatever you need, honey." I wanted to hug her for that response, but I just sat there with my hands flat on the table, still shaking from everything that had happened. Then I heard David's car pull up outside. He walked in and immediately stopped in the doorway when he saw my mom sitting there. He looked at me, then at her, and said, "This is a private matter." My mom looked him straight in the eye and said, "Not anymore." He rolled his eyes and said, "You're both overreacting to this whole situation." I stood up and said firmly, "You don't get to talk to me like that, not after what you've done." Then he had the unbelievable nerve to say, "You're ruining the kids' lives with this drama." "You already did that," I replied. "You did that the moment you decided to bring another woman into their lives and lie to all of us." He tried to walk past me like the conversation was over, but I stepped directly in front of him. He pushed past me roughly, so I shoved him back even harder. My mom stood up and said firmly, "That's enough from both of you." David grabbed his coat and stormed out again, leaving us sitting there in the aftermath of his tantrum. I didn't sleep at all that night. I just kept thinking, how long has this been going on? Why didn't I see it sooner? I kept rereading those text messages I'd photographed, looking for clues I might have missed, trying to piece together a timeline. But nothing made it make sense. It was just him and this Victoria woman pretending like I didn't exist, like our family meant nothing. The next morning, he was gone before we even woke up. He left a note on the kitchen counter that said, "Need some space, don't do anything stupid." I actually laughed out loud when I read that. Like, genuinely laughed, because the absurdity of him telling me not to do anything stupid after what he'd done was just too much. I ate 2 stale granola bars for breakfast because I couldn't stomach anything else, then texted Lisa that I'd be coming over later with the kids. I packed up some of their things and told them we were having a sleepover at Auntie Lisa's house. My daughter asked, "Will Daddy come too?" I said, "Not tonight, sweetheart." I spent the entire day feeling like I was floating above my own life, watching everything happen to someone else. I was at Lisa's house. The kids were playing with their cousins, and she brought me a glass of wine at noon because she said I looked like I needed it. When I showed her the photos from David's phone, she just said, "Holy shit, Rebecca, this is really bad." I didn't say anything. I just kept scrolling through those messages over and over, Like maybe I'd missed some crucial detail that would make this all make sense somehow. Lisa asked, "What are you going to do?" I looked at her and said, "I don't know yet, but I'm not letting him get away with this. Not after everything we've built together." She nodded and said, "Good. It's about time you stopped letting people walk all over you." Later that evening, my mom called to check on me and asked if I was okay. I told her, sort of, which was probably the most honest answer I could give at that point. Then David started texting me. His first message was, "When are you coming home?" I left him on read. He called and I didn't answer. Then he texted again. "You're being childish about this whole thing." I finally responded, "You don't get to call me childish after what you've done." He wrote back, "Let's just talk this through like adults." I replied, "Go talk to your girlfriend." After that, he went silent, which was somehow worse than his pathetic attempts at manipulation. That night, Lisa told me, "You can stay here as long as you want. Seriously, don't feel like you need to figure everything out right away." I thanked her, and later I could hear the kids laughing in the other room with their cousins. I looked at them through the doorway, and I just felt this overwhelming sense of exhaustion. Not sadness exactly, just completely drained and done with everything. I texted myself a reminder, just a simple note that said, "Don't forget this feeling. Don't let him convince you this is normal. Not this time." I meant it. I was tired of being the one who always gave people the benefit of the doubt, who always tried to see the best in situations, even when they were clearly terrible. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now. I know I probably shouldn't be surprised that this happened, but I honestly am. I keep thinking about all the signs I missed, all the times I chose to trust him when my gut was telling me something was off. But mostly, I just want him to feel even half of what I'm feeling right now. I want him to understand that he completely destroyed the one person who actually had his back through everything. I want to break something, honestly. I want to make him regret every single smug, "Don't worry, I've got this" comment he made while he was living this double life. I don't know what happens next, and I'm not even sure what I'm looking for by writing this all out. Maybe advice, maybe just validation that I'm not crazy for feeling like my world just got turned upside down. I just know that I'm not letting this go. Not this time. I'm done being the reasonable one who keeps the peace while everyone else gets to act however they want without consequences. If you've made it this far, thank you for reading this mess. I honestly needed to get it all out more than I realized. My next update will probably be even more chaotic, but I'm not backing down from this fight. I'm not rolling over and pretending this is okay just to keep everyone else comfortable. If you've been in a similar situation, please tell me how you got through it without completely losing your mind or burning everything down around you. I'll update again when something inevitably happens, because knowing David, this is far from over. I can promise it'll be worth reading, because I'm just getting started with standing up for myself. First update, so I guess you could call this the revenge part of my story, but honestly, it's way more exhausting and emotionally draining than I thought it would be. First off, if you don't believe this kind of thing happens to real people in real relationships, I completely get that skepticism. To be honest, I probably wouldn't believe it either if someone else was telling me this story. But this is as real as it gets, and somehow it just keeps getting more unhinged by the day. Here's what happened after that first night when everything came crashing down. I stayed at Lisa's house. That's my sister, for anyone just joining this disaster with the kids. It's not a huge house, so we're pretty cramped, but at least I'm not constantly walking on eggshells and second-guessing every interaction. I'm running on pure spite and caffeine at this point, and I've barely slept more than a few hours each night. Lisa let me use her laptop to change all of my passwords, joint accounts, social media, even my food delivery apps. Because I don't trust David not to be petty and vindictive about every little thing he can control. I didn't want to go completely nuclear right away, but the more I kept scrolling through those messages I'd photographed, the more I wanted to set his entire life on fire. So I did the next most reasonable thing I could think of. I went to the bank and froze our joint account. Not in some wild, illegal way that would get me in trouble, but I took my half of the money out through the normal separation process. I told the bank representative that we were separating and needed to divide the assets. I left enough money in the account to cover our regular bills because I'm not trying to play games with things that affect the kids, but I moved my portion to a completely new account that only I have access to. I don't care if David gets mad about this. I told Lisa that I'm absolutely not going to let him use my financial contribution and my goodwill to buy flowers and gifts for his side piece. That stops right now. I didn't tell him about the bank situation immediately because I wanted to see what he would do on his own. Instead, I sent him a text message saying that the kids were with me and they were safe, and to let me know if he wanted to call and talk to them. He left me on read for hours, which told me everything I needed to know about his priorities. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, he started blowing up my phone. Calls, texts, voice messages, all coming in rapid succession. One minute, he was sending these pathetic apology messages, and the next minute, he was completely furious, saying that I was taking things too far and being unreasonable. He kept insisting that I was overreacting to the situation and that I was punishing him for just being unhappy in our marriage. I just kept texting back the same response. Talk to your girlfriend. He sent me a thumbs up emoji in response, which made me want to throw my phone across the room. But it wasn't even my phone. It was Lisa's old one that she let me borrow. Then, completely out of nowhere, he showed up at Lisa's place. Like, literally walked up to the front door and started ringing the doorbell nonstop like some kind of maniac. Lisa's dog went absolutely nuts with all the noise. I peeked through the blinds and saw him out there in his ratty old hoodie, pacing back and forth on the front porch like he was about to kick the door down. I told the kids to stay in the back room and play, and Lisa opened the front door. She told him very clearly, "You need to leave. Now." He said he just wanted to talk to me, that he deserved to have a conversation about what was happening. Lisa tried to close the door, but he put his hand out and pushed it back open, starting to raise his voice and create a scene. I walked up behind Lisa and said, "If you don't leave right now, I'm calling your mother." That was a threat, by the way. Calling his mother, not mine, because he knows she would be mortified by his behavior. He muttered something under his breath that I couldn't quite hear, then finally shoved the door and walked away. But he slammed his car door so hard when he left that I swear the entire block must have heard it. After that incident, his phone calls went from, "Let's work this out like adults," to, "You're ruining the kids' lives," and being completely unreasonable. He kept trying to guilt trip me with these manipulative messages about how I needed to think about our family and stop being so vindictive about everything. That's when I decided to really twist the knife. I sent him copies of all the photos I'd taken from his secret phone, the ones of him and Victoria together, the screenshots of their text conversations, all of it. I included a message that said, "Want to see what actually ruining a family looks like?" He didn't reply to that at all. Then I forwarded him the photos of Victoria with our kids at the playground, just to make sure he understood exactly how deep his betrayal went. Was it petty? Absolutely. Do I care? Not even a little bit. He tried calling my mom next, but she didn't answer his calls. Then he called my dad, who's mostly just confused by this whole situation, and told David, "I'm not getting in the middle of whatever's going on between you two." When I explained the whole situation to my parents, my mom immediately said, "Whatever you need, we'll help you through this." My dad was more measured about it and said, "Just try not to make it ugly for the kids if you can help it." I told him, "It's already ugly, Dad. That ship has sailed." Then David's parents decided to get involved, which made everything 10 times more complicated. His mother called me with this fake innocent tone, asking if we could all sit down and talk through this situation like reasonable adults. I asked her directly, "Did you know about Victoria?" She completely sidestepped the question and said, "That's not the point here. You shouldn't be taking the kids away from their father like this." I told her, "The kids aren't bargaining chips in whatever game you think we're playing." She hung up on me. Then his father sent me a text message saying he was disappointed in how I was handling the whole situation. The audacity of these people was absolutely breathtaking. The next morning, I called the kids' school. I didn't want to make it into some big dramatic spectacle, so I just asked if they had a policy about who was authorized to pick up the children. The secretary told me that only people on the approved list could pick them up. I asked if they could make sure that David couldn't pick up the kids without me being present or giving explicit permission. She asked if everything was okay at home, and I said, "It's just a family situation. Nothing too dramatic, but I want to make sure we follow proper procedures." She said they would update the file immediately. Then I asked if there was anyone named Victoria working at the school in any capacity. She said, "No, we don't have anyone by that name on staff." When I hung up, I felt my stomach drop. So who was this Victoria person really? Just some random woman he'd met somewhere who had been lying to my children about being a teacher's assistant? Not even a legitimate staff member at their school? I texted one of the other moms I'm friendly with and asked if she knew anything about this Victoria situation. She said she'd never heard of anyone by that name, but offered to ask around at pickup time. Later that day, she got back to me and said none of the other parents had heard anything about a Victoria either. The days started blurring together after that. David kept texting me at all hours, sometimes in all capital letters, sometimes with this weirdly calm tone, and sometimes he'd send voice messages that were just heavy breathing or incoherent rambling. I ignored all of it. Then I heard from Thomas, who's this mutual friend of ours who's not even that close to us. He mostly just reposts memes in our group chats and stays out of drama. But he reached out to tell me that David had been going around telling people that I'd completely lost it and was acting unstable. I told Thomas the real story about what had happened, and he said, "Damn, I wasn't expecting that at all. But I don't really want to take sides in this whole thing." Which is typical, honestly. Nobody wants to get involved when things get messy. Living at Lisa's house was complete chaos, but at least it was honest chaos. The kids were confused and kept asking when we were going home. I tried to keep things as normal as possible for them, making French toast in the mornings, taking walks to the park, and letting them watch extra TV because honestly, we all needed the distraction. At one point, my daughter looked up at me and asked, "Did Daddy do something bad?" I told her, "It's just grown-up problems, sweetheart. It's not your fault, and it's nothing you need to worry about." She just shrugged and said, "Can we have waffles tomorrow instead of French toast?" I said, "Sure, why not?" Sometimes kids really do have their priorities straight. Then, out of nowhere, David's sister Nicole decided to insert herself into the situation. She sent me this long text message about how I was tearing the family apart and being completely unreasonable. She said that David hadn't been happy for a long time and that I never bothered to notice or care about his feelings. The message went on to say, "You always made him feel small and inadequate. You never let him be himself or express who he really was." I almost started laughing when I read that. I replied, "You don't know anything about our marriage or what went on behind closed doors." She sent me a thumbs down emoji, so I blocked her number immediately. When I told Lisa about it, she just said, "Screw all of them. They're all enabling his behavior." Later that night, David showed up at Lisa's house again. This time, he was yelling from the driveway, saying that he wasn't going to leave until I came out and talked to him like an adult. Lisa called my dad and said, "Can you please come over here and help us deal with this situation?" My dad lives about 5 minutes away, so he was there quickly. He walked up to David and said very calmly, "Go home, David. You're not going to get anywhere with this kind of behavior." David tried to push past my dad, but my dad put his hand firmly on David's chest and said, "Not tonight. This isn't the way to handle things." David shoved my dad's hand away aggressively. My dad didn't even flinch or react with anger. He just stood there completely calm and steady. I was watching from the window, and I have to admit, I felt angry, but also kind of proud of my dad for handling it so well. The next day, I called the bank to make sure all of our financial arrangements were properly set up and that there hadn't been any weird withdrawals or suspicious activity. Everything looked fine. I moved some additional money to make sure I could cover anything the kids needed. Then I sent David a text saying, "If you need money for anything related to the kids, just let me know." He replied, "I'm not a deadbeat father." I wrote back, "Then prove it." He didn't respond to that. The weirdest part about this whole situation is how some things just continued to feel completely normal. I was still getting emails from the school about upcoming events, still having to remember when it was snack day, still needing to buy groceries and track down lost socks and deal with all the regular parenting stuff. But everything felt like I was walking through thick mud, like every simple task required twice as much energy as it should. Lisa tried to distract me with stupid memes and funny videos. One night, she made me do a face mask with her, even though I looked like a serial killer in the clay mask she picked out. We actually laughed together for a few minutes, but then my phone buzzed with another message from David, and the reality of the situation came crashing back down. I muted his number after that, but somehow he kept finding ways to get through. About a week into this whole ordeal, I got an email from the school principal asking if she could touch base with me about the kids. I went in and sat in her office, trying to look like I had everything under control when I definitely didn't. She asked if everything was okay at home, and I gave her the simplified version. "We're going through a separation. There's been some tension, but the kids are safe and we're handling it." The principal nodded and said, "Your daughter has mentioned someone called Miss Victoria again, and we're a little concerned because we want to make sure we have accurate information about who's involved in the children's lives." I told her, "As far as I know, there's no Miss Victoria working at this school in any capacity." She confirmed, "That's correct. We've never had anyone by that name work here in any role." Then she asked, "Has anyone who's not on the approved list tried to pick up the children?" I said, "Not yet, but I want to make sure the protocols are in place." When I left that meeting, I felt even more creeped out than before. This whole Victoria situation was becoming more disturbing by the day. That night, David showed up at our house again. This time, he didn't even bother knocking or ringing the doorbell. He just stood outside in the yard and started calling my name, saying, "I just want to talk to you like a reasonable person." I opened the upstairs window and yelled down, "Go home or I'm calling your mother." He cursed loudly, slapped the window frame with his hand, and stormed off to his car. I slammed the window shut and felt my heart pounding. This behavior was escalating, and it was starting to genuinely frighten me. Over the next few days, his parents kept calling with this rotating strategy of guilt trips, and let's all be reasonable about this. Finally, I decided I'd had enough of their manipulation tactics. I sent them the photos from David's secret phone, all of them, including the ones of him with Victoria, and the screenshots of their text conversations planning their future together. I included a message that said, "You want to know what's really happening here? Here's your golden boy in action." His mother called me back about an hour later, crying, and said, "I can't believe he would do something like this to you and the children." I told her, "Well, you better start believing it, because this is who your son really is." I kept thinking about this Victoria person and trying to figure out who she actually was. I looked her up on Facebook, but nothing obvious came up under that name. I checked Instagram with the same results. I even went through photos on my kids' accounts and my own social media to see if she had tagged them somewhere or appeared in any pictures, but I found absolutely nothing. I felt like I was chasing a ghost. I sent David a text asking, "Who is Victoria really? What's her last name? Where did you meet her?" He just replied, "Drop it." I wrote back, "That's not happening. I deserve to know who's been around my children." He didn't respond to that either. I was getting tired of waiting around for him to make the next move in this twisted game. I decided to take some control back. I texted him, "If you want to see the kids, you need to set something up through my mom. No more showing up places unannounced." He replied, "You're making this impossible." I said, "You did that when you decided to have an affair." Then he sent me a photo of the kids from about 2 months ago. One of those cute, candid shots of them playing in the backyard. He included a message that said, "Remember when we were actually happy?" I replied, "You threw that away. That's on you, not me." I heard from Thomas again. You know, the meme guy from our group chats who usually stays out of everyone's drama. He reached out to tell me that David had been going around to mutual friends, telling them that I was completely unstable and that I had taken the kids and all the money and disappeared. I told Thomas to ask David for screenshots or any kind of proof to back up his claims. Thomas just sent me a meme of a dumpster fire in response, which actually made me laugh for the first time in days. Sometimes humor is the only thing that keeps you sane in situations like this. So now here I am, still at Lisa's house. The kids are finally asleep after a long day, and Lisa's watching some ridiculous dating show on her iPad. I'm sitting here typing this whole update on her laptop, feeling like I'm stuck in some kind of weird limbo, but also like I'm finally getting somewhere meaningful. David is clearly unraveling. His own family is starting to turn on him now that they've seen the evidence of what he actually did. And I'm not backing down or giving him an inch. I know I'm not perfect in this situation. I know that I was tired a lot of the time, and maybe I was emotionally checked out in some ways. But I was never cruel to him. I was never dishonest or manipulative. He treated me like I was just a background character in his own personal drama. I think he wanted to feel young and exciting again, or whatever midlife crisis nonsense was going through his head. But the thing is, he genuinely seems to believe that if he just yells loud enough or shows up at enough places uninvited, I'll eventually cave and let him back into our lives like nothing happened. But I'm not that person anymore. I'm not the woman who keeps the peace at any cost just to avoid conflict. So yeah, that's where I'm at with everything. This isn't the big dramatic ending that some people might be looking for, but it's real life. And real life is messy and complicated and doesn't always wrap up neatly. David isn't stopping his manipulation tactics, but neither am I. I'm completely done being the one who always has to be the mature, reasonable person, while everyone else gets to act however they want without consequences. I want him to know that he lost everything, and it's entirely his own fault. I want him to understand the magnitude of what he threw away. If you're still reading this incredibly long saga, thank you for sticking with me through all of this chaos. I'll definitely update again when the next inevitable blow-up happens, because trust me, it will. David's not the type to just quietly accept that he's lost. I'm honestly just getting started with standing up for myself, and if you've ever been in a similar situation, please let me know how you managed to keep your sanity intact, because this whole thing has been absolutely wild from start to finish. Second update. So if you thought my last update was peak chaos, you should probably buckle up for this one, because apparently my life decided to become some twisted combination of the worst reality TV show and the most awkward group chat conversation that's ever existed. I'm still staying at Lisa's house with the kids, and they're still asking when we're going home to our regular house. Meanwhile, I'm still running on nothing but caffeine, and what I can only describe as pure rage fumes at this point. This week, though, everything got exponentially messier than I thought was even possible. I'm honestly starting to think that David has completely lost all sense of self-preservation. Maybe he genuinely believes that if he just keeps pushing harder and harder, I'll eventually fold and give him what he wants. But if that's his strategy, he's seriously miscalculated who he's dealing with. If anything, every single time he tries some new manipulative tactic, I get more stubborn and more determined not to give him an inch. So here's all the latest drama, and there's a lot to unpack, so I apologize in advance because this is going to be another really long update. The first weird thing I started noticing was that my phone battery was draining ridiculously fast. At first, I thought it was just because my son keeps sneaking my phone to play games when he thinks I'm not paying attention. But then I realized that my call log was completely full of missed calls from random numbers I didn't recognize. These calls were coming in really late at night too, like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., that kind of timing. I would block one number, and then another completely different number would start calling. None of them were leaving voicemails. They were just calling and hanging up when it went to voicemail. It wasn't exactly scary, but it was definitely annoying and creepy. I told Lisa about it, and she said, "Maybe it's David getting his friends to harass you." I said, "If that's what he's doing, then they're all cowards because nobody's actually saying anything when I answer." Then on Tuesday, I was at the grocery store with my son, just trying to do normal errands and keep our routine as stable as possible. While I was walking through the parking lot, I spotted David's car parked in the lot. I almost decided to skip the produce section entirely just to avoid any kind of confrontation or awkward scene. But he never actually came inside the store. I sent him a text that said, "Seriously, do not follow me around town." He didn't reply to that message. But later that same night, Lisa told me that he had also messaged her, asking when I was going to start being reasonable about the whole situation. The next day, I was trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. I dropped the kids off at school, came back to Lisa's house, made myself coffee, and was scrolling through social media trying to distract myself from everything. That's when I saw a friend request from someone named Victoria. The profile picture was a close-up shot of purple hair, and when I looked more closely, they were the same eyes I recognized from those playground photos I'd found on David's secret phone. Her bio was just a random string of emojis with no useful information, and we had zero mutual friends, which was suspicious. I let the friend request sit there for about 2 hours without responding. Then she sent me a direct message that said, "Hey, can we talk?" I swear I didn't know everything that was going on. I just stared at my phone screen thinking, what could you possibly want to say to me? I didn't reply immediately, but she sent another message. "I'm not trying to start a fight or cause more drama. I just want to explain my side of what happened." I showed the messages to Lisa, and she immediately said, "Block her. You don't need to hear anything she has to say." But I didn't block her right away. Instead, I replied, "What exactly do you want to explain?" She wrote back with this massive wall of text that I honestly wasn't prepared for. Basically, she said that she had met David at the gym. Of course it was at the gym, because where else do middle-aged men go to have their midlife crises? She claimed that she didn't know he was married at first, and that he had told her we were separated but still living together for the sake of the kids. According to her story, David had painted this picture where I was completely cold and distant toward him for years, and that our marriage had been over in everything but name for a long time. She said she only found out the real truth about me and the kids after she had already met them in person, but that David had assured her that I knew all about her and was fine with the arrangement. I just needed some time to adjust to the new situation. She went on to say that she didn't mean to get caught in the middle of our marriage problems, but that by the time she realized what was actually happening, she had already developed genuine feelings for David and didn't know how to extract herself from the situation. I was reading this entire message with my hands literally shaking, but not from sadness, from pure, unadulterated rage. I wrote back, "You knew he had kids. You made them apple juice and let them think you were just some innocent teacher's helper. That's not accidentally getting caught in the middle. That's actively choosing to participate in lying to children." She replied, "I'm really sorry. I believed everything he told me. I genuinely thought you didn't care about the marriage anymore and that you hated him." I was so angry I could barely type a coherent response. I just blocked her completely after that exchange. I didn't need to hear any more of her girl-to-girl, "I'm really sorry" energy. I took screenshots of the entire conversation and sent them to David with the caption, "Your mess, not mine. Clean it up yourself." So I figured that would be the end of Victoria trying to contact me, and maybe she would finally back off and leave our family alone. But the very next morning, I got a text message that made my blood pressure spike instantly. It was a group text that included me, David's mother, his father, and his sister Nicole. David's mother had initiated the group and written, "Can we please have a family meeting?" This whole situation is getting completely out of control, and the kids are the ones who are suffering the most. Nicole immediately chimed in with her own message. "Rebecca, you're being vindictive and unreasonable. David's not a bad father, and we all need to work this out like adults for everyone's sake." I almost started laughing at the sheer audacity of these people. I replied to the group text, "Send me one single reason why I should ever trust him again after what he's done." Complete silence from all of them. I went about my day. I had laundry running in the dryer, my son was begging me to make French toast for breakfast, and Lisa had actually left me a note on the refrigerator that said, "Don't burn the house down while I'm at work." I'm honestly so exhausted by all of this drama that I just stood in front of the open refrigerator staring at nothing but oat milk and leftover takeout thinking, is this really what my life has become? Then my phone started buzzing again. It was David calling me directly. I declined the call, but he immediately called back. I finally answered, and I was already snapping before I even said hello. "What do you want, David?" He said, "Let's talk in person, just the two of us. No lawyers, no family members, just us." I said, "That's absolutely not happening." He said, "You owe me at least that much." I said, "I don't owe you anything after what you've put me and the kids through." He hung up on me without another word. That afternoon, I was picking up the kids from school, and I noticed David's car parked about a block away from the school entrance. He was just sitting there with the windows down, staring at his phone like some kind of creepy stalker. I completely ignored him, buckled the kids into their car seats, and drove off without acknowledging his presence. Later that evening, I got a text from him asking, "Can I see the kids tomorrow?" I replied, "Set it up through my mom like I already told you." He wrote back, "Why do you keep punishing me for trying to be honest about my feelings?" I didn't even dignify that with a response. The next day, I needed to go back to our house for the first time in weeks to grab some essential stuff we'd forgotten. More clothes for the kids, my good shoes, and just random little things that you don't realize you need until you don't have them. I texted David the night before and specifically asked him not to be there when I came by. I just wanted to get in, get our stuff, and get out without any confrontation or drama. But of course, the second I walked through the front door, I heard the back door opening. There he was, just standing in the kitchen with his arms crossed like he was waiting for me. I said, "I specifically told you not to be here today." He said, "It's my house too." I said, "Not today it isn't." He tried to position himself in front of the hallway to block my path, but I pushed past him. That's when he grabbed my arm, and I immediately slapped his hand away as hard as I could. He said, "Stop making this harder than it needs to be." I said, "Move out of my way." I managed to get to the car with the kids' stuff, and my hands were shaking the entire time. Thank God I had decided not to bring the kids inside with me because they were safely strapped into their car seats the whole time. I drove off immediately and called Lisa to tell her, I'm never letting him corner me alone again. She said, "Good call. Want me to come with you next time?" I said, "Yes, definitely." Later that night, I got another direct message, but this time it was from Victoria again, using a completely different account. The message just said, "He's lying to both of us. I'm out." I didn't reply to that either, but I have to admit it gave me a small sense of satisfaction. So then Friday rolled around, and I was at the playground letting the kids burn off some energy after a long week. Out of nowhere, Nicole, that's David's sister, showed up with her own kid. She walked over to me like nothing weird was happening, and there wasn't this massive family drama going on. She said, "Can we talk for a minute?" I said, "About what exactly?" She said, "You're making this whole situation way harder than it has to be. David's a complete mess, and you're ruining his entire life over this." I said, "He ruined his own life when he decided to have an affair." She said, "He's still your children's father. You need to be fair and think about what's best for them." I said, "He can see his children when he stops acting like a complete psychopath." She rolled her eyes and said, "You're always so dramatic about everything." I said, "And you're always so desperate to fix other people's problems instead of minding your own business." She snapped back, "At least I don't run away from problems when things get difficult." I actually laughed out loud and said, "You run away from reality on a daily basis." She glared at me, grabbed her kid's hand, and stormed off without another word. But then came the real kicker that made this whole week absolutely insane. David actually showed up at my workplace. I'm not even kidding about this. He came to my job. I was in the parking lot after work, waiting for Lisa to pick me up, just listening to music with my earbuds in and trying to decompress from the day. I saw him get out of his car and walk straight toward me. He said, "We really need to talk about this situation." I pulled out one earbud and said, "Not here. This is my workplace." He said, "You can't keep avoiding me forever." I said, "Watch me do exactly that." He tried to position himself in front of me to block my path to Lisa's car, so I walked around him. That's when he grabbed my arm again, and I shoved him hard enough that he actually stumbled backward. I said loudly, "Do not ever touch me again." He said, "You're making a scene in public." I said, "You're the one who showed up at my job uninvited." Right at that moment, Lisa pulled up and saw what was happening. She got out of her car and said, "Get in the car right now." I jumped into the passenger seat and David actually tried to approach the driver's side to stop us from leaving. Lisa slammed her door shut and peeled out of the parking lot while he was still standing there. My hands were shaking, but I just started laughing, half from relief and half from pure rage at the absurdity of my life becoming this completely unhinged soap opera. After that workplace incident, I got a phone call from the school principal that made my stomach drop. She told me there had been an incident during dismissal that afternoon. Apparently, David had tried to pick up the kids without being on the approved list, and when the staff wouldn't allow it, he had argued with them and made a scene before finally leaving. The principal assured me that they were updating the file immediately, and that now only I, Lisa, or my mom would be authorized to pick up the children. I apologized profusely for the drama this was causing at their school. She said, "Unfortunately, we see this kind of situation more often than you'd think. We're here to keep the kids safe." It wasn't exactly comforting, but at least I knew the school was taking it seriously and had proper protocols in place. That night, my mom called to tell me that David's parents had been calling her nonstop with increasingly desperate messages. She said, "They're actually threatening to go to court for grandparent rights." I told her, "Let them try. They can explain to a judge why they think their son's affair and stalking behavior makes him a good role model." She said, "They're just scared of losing access to the kids." I said, "They should have been scared of this outcome before they started defending his behavior." She assured me, "Your father and I will back you up completely no matter what they try to do." And I swear, the universe just wanted to pile even more chaos onto this situation, because as soon as I hung up with my mom, I got another group text. This time, it was from Nicole, David's mom, and David himself, all ganging up on me in one conversation. Nicole wrote, "You're destroying this entire family for no reason." David's mom added, "I can't believe you're doing this to your own children." David chimed in with, "I hope you're happy with what you've accomplished." I had had absolutely enough of their manipulation tactics. I sent them screenshots of David's text messages to Victoria, including all the planning conversations about their future together. I wrote, "This is your precious golden boy in action. Ask him how happy he is with what he accomplished." Then I left the group chat entirely and blocked all of their numbers. I texted Lisa and said, "I'm completely done with all of them." She replied, "Good, it's about time." I started the paperwork for a legal separation that week. It's not a fast process, but I wasn't playing games anymore. I told David through a text message, "I'm filing the paperwork. You'll be served with the documents soon." He replied, "You're being completely impossible." I said, "So are you." The difference is that I'm not the one who cheated. He called me several nasty names in his response, so I just hung up and didn't engage any further. So yeah, I know this whole situation is a complete mess. I know my kids are going to have questions that I'll need to answer eventually. I know people are going to talk and have opinions about how I'm handling everything. I know David's family is probably going to get even nastier before they finally get tired of fighting a losing battle. But I'm not budging on any of this. I refuse to let him rewrite the entire story just because he's embarrassed that he got caught red-handed. He can whine and complain to his sister all he wants. He can send pathetic messages to Victoria. He can stalk my social media accounts and try to play the victim to anyone who will listen. I'm not scared of him anymore, and I'm not going to let his tantrums and manipulation tactics work on me. One last thing before I wrap up this update, because this is getting ridiculously long. My daughter asked me the other day, "Why is Daddy so mad all the time now?" I told her, "He made some choices that hurt people, and now he's upset about having to deal with the consequences of those choices." She thought about that for a second and then said, "So we're not going back to our old house?" I said, "Not yet, sweetheart." She just shrugged and said, "Okay, can I have French toast again tomorrow morning?" I said, "Of course you can." Sometimes kids really do have the right perspective on things. They focus on what actually matters and don't get caught up in all the adult drama and complications. So if you've made it this far through my incredibly long and chaotic story, thank you for listening to what basically amounts to my TED Talk about navigating a complete nightmare. My next update will probably be even messier than this one, Because I've just started the legal separation process and David is already completely losing his grip on reality. I want to be clear about something. I'm not sorry for how I've handled this situation, and I'm not planning to soften my approach or try to be more understanding. I want him to feel every single bit of what he made me feel, and then some. You can call me petty if you want. I honestly don't care anymore. I'm completely done being the reasonable one who always has to be the mature adult while everyone else gets to act however they want without facing any real consequences. I spent years being the person who kept the peace, who made excuses for other people's bad behavior, who tried to see the best in every situation, even when it was clearly terrible. Not anymore. I want David to understand the full magnitude of what he threw away when he decided to betray our family. I want him to know that he completely destroyed the one person who actually had his back through everything. I want to break something when I think about all the times I defended him to other people, all the times I made sacrifices so he could have what he wanted, all the times I put his needs before my own. I want him to regret every single smug, "Don't worry, I've got this" comment he made while he was living this elaborate double life. I want him to feel like the complete fool he is for thinking I was too stupid or too distracted to figure out what was happening right in front of my face. I don't know exactly what's going to happen next in this ongoing disaster, but I know it's going to involve more legal paperwork, more family drama, and probably more attempts by David to manipulate the situation in his favor. I just know that I'm not letting any of this go. Not this time. I'm not rolling over and pretending everything is fine just to make other people comfortable. I'm not going to be the bigger person who graciously forgives and forgets so that everyone else can move on with their lives while I'm left to deal with the emotional wreckage. Will my next update probably be a complete mess? Absolutely. But I'm not backing down from this fight, and I'm not going to apologize for standing up for myself and my children. I'll update again when David finally gets served with the legal papers, or when his family decides to show up with pitchforks, whichever comes first. Until then, I'll be here at Lisa's house, drinking too much coffee and refusing to be the doormat I used to be. Thanks for reading this incredibly long saga. Seriously, I needed to get all of this out of my head more than I realized, and writing it down has actually been therapeutic in a weird way. Last update. So I guess this is the finale to my completely insane story, and I'm still kind of in disbelief that all of this actually happened to me. Like, I feel like I'm some random side character in a bad Netflix original series, but whatever, here we are, and this is apparently my life now. I should have known that the energy was going to get even weirder when I woke up and saw that my phone showed 17 missed calls from overnight. It wasn't just David calling, it was his mom, Nicole, random numbers I didn't recognize, and even a text from Thomas, the meme guy from our group chats, saying, "Yo, David's completely losing it." I just stared at my phone for a few seconds thinking, is he actually going to show up at Lisa's house again and try to break down the door? I told Lisa, "Please keep an eye on the front door today. I have a feeling something's coming." She just rolled her eyes and said, "If he tries anything, I'm going full Home Alone on him with booby traps." So yeah, things had been weirdly quiet for about 3 days, which in my current world means that something big is definitely brewing. I had already started the divorce paperwork, which is slow and expensive and incredibly annoying, but absolutely necessary at this point. My mom and dad have been amazing through all of this. They've been helping with the kids, running them to school, and making sure I actually eat real food instead of just surviving on coffee and spite. I finally got the all clear from my lawyer to go back to the house and collect the rest of our belongings. So I figured I might as well just rip the Band-Aid off and get it over with. I texted David the night before and told him, "Don't be there tomorrow. I'm just grabbing the last of our things and then I'm done." He didn't respond to that message, which I took as acknowledgement, but I should have known better. I showed up at the house with Lisa, my dad, and the kids. I let the kids stay in the car with their tablets because I didn't want them to see whatever mess was waiting for us inside. When we walked through the front door, it was eerily quiet in a way that felt almost unnatural. The kitchen looked like no one had actually used it in weeks, which honestly tracks, because David always expected me to handle the grocery shopping and meal planning. There was a pile of unopened mail scattered around, random garbage on the counters, and a single mug in the sink with what looked like old instant ramen floating around in it. I just shook my head at the state of everything. Lisa helped me pack up the rest of the kids' clothes and toys. I grabbed my good shoes and some personal items, and my dad kept making trips back and forth to the car without saying much. He just focused on getting everything done efficiently. Then I found an envelope sitting on the dining room table with just my name written on it in David's handwriting. I opened it up, and inside were divorce papers that David had already signed. I honestly didn't expect it to hit me as hard as it did. I mean, I was already working on my own paperwork, so I knew this was coming. But seeing his actual signature on those documents felt so final and definitive. There was a sticky note attached to the top of the papers that said, "You ruined everything. Hope you're happy." I almost started laughing at the sheer audacity of that message. I put the papers back in the envelope and stuck them in my bag to deal with later. As we were finishing up and getting ready to leave, I heard a car door slam outside. Of course it was David's car. And of course he came storming up the driveway yelling, "You can't just take everything that belongs to this family." Lisa immediately stepped in front of me and said, "Not today, David." He glared at her and tried to push past her, but my dad moved to stand right next to Lisa, creating a wall between David and me. David said, "This is my house and my family." I said, "Not for much longer." He was visibly shaking and yelling, "You're doing all of this just to spite me!" I said, "You did this to yourself with your own choices." He tried to grab my arm again, but I slapped his hand away harder than I ever had before. He said, "You're completely insane." I said, "And you're absolutely pathetic." Lisa told him firmly, "Back off right now." He yelled, "You made me do this! You pushed me into her arms!" I said, "You made your own decisions and now you get to live with the consequences." We got in the car and drove away while he was still standing in the driveway shouting at us. I moved into my parents' spare room that same night, just temporarily while I figured out my next steps. It's cramped and the bathroom door sticks, and the Wi-Fi is absolutely terrible. But the kids are doing fine, and for the first time in weeks, I actually got a full night's sleep. My mom made French toast in the morning, which felt like such a normal, comforting thing after all the chaos. My son asked if we could go home to our regular house yet, and I told him, "We are home for now, sweetheart." He just shrugged and went back to his tablet, completely unbothered by the whole situation. Then the real fun started all over again. David began calling me constantly, not just once or twice, but literally all day long. When I stopped picking up his calls, he switched to texting. At first, the messages were all, "Can we please talk about this like adults?" Then they escalated to, "You can't keep the kids away from me forever." Then it became straight-up guilt trips about how I was breaking up the family and making the worst mistake of my life, and how I was going to regret all of this someday. I blocked his number, so he started using different numbers to contact me. I blocked those too. Then he started texting not just me, but my dad, my mom, and even Lisa, sending all of them the same manipulative messages about how we were all against him and how we were going to regret turning his own children against him. His mom jumped back into the fray, texting me constantly with messages like, "You need to talk to David. He's not eating, he's not sleeping, and he's saying he can't go on like this." I told her that if David wanted to see the kids, he needed to do it through proper legal channels. No more surprise visits and ambush tactics. She said I was being cruel and heartless. I said, "Ask your son why we're in this situation in the first place." The next weekend, David showed up at my parents' house, which was honestly the last straw for me. He just stood on the front porch texting me, "I can see you in there. Let me in. I just want to see the kids." My dad opened the door and said very calmly, "Not today, David." David pushed past my dad and walked straight into the living room yelling, "You're all against me! How can you do this to me?" I stood up and told him, "You can leave voluntarily or I can call someone to escort you out. Your choice." He said, "I'm not leaving. This is my family." I said, "You gave up that right the second you brought another woman into their lives and lied to all of us." He tried to slam his hand down on my mom's coffee table, but my mom just stood there with her arms crossed and said, "Don't you dare break my table." David looked at her, then at me, then back at my dad. My dad said, "Don't make me tell you again." David finally stormed out, slamming the front door behind him. That night was really rough emotionally. My daughter asked me if Daddy was mad at us, and I told her, "He's upset, but it's not your fault, and it's not something you need to worry about." She asked if we would ever go back to our old house, and I said, "This is our home for a while." She just said, "Okay," and went back to playing. The days immediately after that incident, David went completely silent, which was honestly more unsettling than his constant harassment. Then the official paperwork started rolling in for real court dates, custody hearings, all the legal documentation that you never want to have to read but becomes necessary when your life falls apart. I kept everything above board and professional. I never talked badly about David in front of the kids, and I just kept telling them that we were figuring things out and that none of this was their fault. Lisa kept telling me I should be proud of how I was handling everything, but honestly, I was just completely exhausted. My mom kept cooking elaborate meals, and my dad kept fixing random things around the house that didn't really need fixing. Then came another plot twist that I definitely wasn't expecting. I received a letter from David's lawyer, basically saying that he wanted joint custody of the kids, wanted to keep the house, wanted to keep the car, and wanted to split everything 50-50 like none of this had been his fault. I actually laughed out loud when I read that. I texted him, "You want to play legal games? Fine, let's play." I sent him screenshots of all the messages between him and Victoria, including the ones where they were planning their future together. I wrote, "Good luck explaining this to a judge." He replied, "You're completely heartless." I replied, "And you're completely reckless." The court hearing was an absolute nightmare. Not in an exciting, dramatic way, but just long and awkward and emotionally draining. David's lawyer tried to paint me as unstable and vindictive for taking the kids out of the house without telling David first, completely ignoring the whole affair situation and the fact that he had been lying to our entire family for months. My lawyer asked pointed questions about the second phone, the text messages between David and Victoria, and the way David had tried to pick up the kids from school without proper authorization. David looked furious the entire time, like he genuinely couldn't believe that he wasn't getting his way and that people were actually holding him accountable for his actions. Nicole, his sister, was sitting in the courtroom just glaring at me through the entire proceeding. His mother was there too, but she wouldn't even make eye contact with me. My parents sat directly behind me, completely stone-faced and supportive. Now it's been about 2 weeks since all of that legal drama, and David is living in some apartment near downtown. I heard from Thomas, the meme guy, that David had been couch surfing before he found that place, constantly complaining to anyone who would listen that I had taken everything from him and somehow turned everyone against him. Nobody's really buying his victim narrative anymore, though. Even Nicole has gone completely quiet, which tells me that even she's getting tired of defending his behavior. Victoria's name hasn't come up once in any conversation with his family members, which I find interesting. I'm not even curious about what happened with that situation at this point. The financial situation is challenging, but I'm managing to figure it out day by day. I didn't take anything beyond my fair share from our joint accounts. I left him enough to cover his bills and took only what was rightfully mine. My parents have been helping with groceries and everyday expenses, and Lisa fills in the gaps when needed. I'm still staying at my parents' house, but I've started seriously looking for a new apartment for me and the kids. The kids are honestly doing better than I expected them to. My daughter actually drew a picture of our family the other day, and it was just me, her little brother, and grandma and grandpa. No David anywhere in the picture. So yeah, that's where everything stands right now. I know people probably want some kind of neat, satisfying ending where everything gets wrapped up perfectly, but real life just isn't like that. The situation is still ongoing, and there are probably going to be more legal proceedings and more family drama before everything is completely settled. I'm not magically healed from all of this, and I'm not stronger for the experience or any of that inspirational Pinterest nonsense that people like to say. I'm just done with the whole situation. I did what I had to do, and I fought back when I needed to fight back. I absolutely refuse to be the doormat who just accepts whatever treatment other people decide to give me. If that makes me the villain in David's version of this story, I'm completely fine with that. I'd rather be hated for standing up for myself than walked over and disrespected ever again. I don't know exactly what happens next in my life, but I know it's not going to involve David in any meaningful way. I'm glad that my kids won't grow up thinking that this kind of behavior is normal or acceptable in relationships. I want them to see that actions have consequences, and that people who betray your trust don't automatically deserve forgiveness just because they're sorry they got caught. I'm not sorry for how I handled any of this, and I'm not going to apologize for refusing to make everyone else's life easier by just quietly accepting the situation. And if David happens to be reading this, because I know he still stalks my social media accounts, I want him to know one thing: not this time. You lost, and you lost because of your own choices and your own actions. Thanks for reading this incredibly long saga, for real. Maybe my next update will be about something completely boring, like finally finding a new apartment with decent Wi-Fi and a dishwasher that actually works. But for now, I'm just glad to be done with this chapter of my life. If anyone wants to share stories about the wildest, most ridiculous thing an ex ever texted them, please drop it in the comments below. I could honestly use a good laugh after everything that's happened.